is Dr. Melissa Van Click-Hahn. Melissa earned her PhD in Ecology, Evolution, and Conservation Biology from the University of Hawaii at Manoa, studying invasion ecology of introduced reptiles and amphibians in the Hawaiian archipelago. She has since then held various biology teaching positions at Windward Community College in Kaneohe, Hawaii. Say how?
Kaneohe,
Hawaii. Cochise College in Sierra Vista, Arizona, and both Pima Community College and Basis Charter Schools here in Tucson, Arizona. In 2022, Melissa began working for Pima County as an environmental education program coordinator with the Conservation, Lands, and Resources Department, where she focused on developing and coordinated public programs relating to ecology, biodiversity, and herpetology. Then in 2024, she started her current position with the Ecological Monitoring Program, implementing conservation goals of various animal and plant species under the Pima County's Multi-Species Conservation Plan. Well, welcome, Melissa, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share. There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, can you all see it?
It looks great. Yes.
Okay. Minimize you. All right, so yeah, I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for having me. It has been such a pleasure in my new position with the Ecological Monitoring Program. It's amazing to, oh goodness, sorry. It's really amazing to be able to do the work that we get to do. It is actually just a dream job. It can be very, very difficult at times, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by some of the field work that we do. But when it comes out of it, one of my favorite parts about being an ecological monitoring program coordinator is the ability to see an entire study all the way through. So that means like putting together the field work and the data collection, then going out and collecting the data, then being able to analyze the data, write up all of the reports and management conclusions, and then see something come out of it. And especially now that the Conservation Lands and Resources Group is put together. So it used to be, of course, part of the natural resources, part of Natural Resources Parks and Rec, and the conservation group from OSC, the Office of Sustainability and Conservation, came together under one umbrella to kind of implement the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan. And this is part of that. So in the EMP, so in our ecological monitoring program, we have our job is to implement the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan, and specifically the Multi-Species Conservation Plan, which is part of that. So it fulfills our obligation to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to mitigate for any activities by the county that may harm endangered or threatened species on our more than 250,000 acres that we have now of parks and ranches and conservation land. So the Sonoran Desert tortoise is actually one of 44 species that's covered under this plan. And it's one of quite a few species that we monitor regularly and we plan to do over the 30 years of the MSCP. So this is just one of 44 species that we study. And so you can kind of think about how we do this. And one of the reasons you'll see too that we only monitor species in these like 2 to 3 year rotations is so that we can try to get to almost all of these 44 species. So we'll start with the Sonoran Desert tortoise. Okay. Okay, I can do this. Enter. How about this? Right. There we go. Okay. So one of the reasons that long-term population studies are really important is that you can actually move towards the recovery of threatened species. And I want to give a good example of that. So this is the Apache trout. It occurs in Arizona and across much of the western United States, and it was first listed as an endangered species in 1967. And then it took until 2009, that was a long time, to actually determine what the recovery plan should be for this species so that it can become delisted eventually. Now, a lot of species don't actually come out of recovery. Some actually become extinct. But there are some that we can work towards recovering. And these are the kinds of things that are part of those recovery plans. So for the Apache trout, recovery activities included habitat restoration and stream restoration, and then long-term survey efforts, and then genetic studies also to look at population genetics and where species can be translocated and reintroduced to other places. All of this had to happen, of course, with partnerships with local agencies, federal agencies, and also tribes. And they all work together. And in 2024, just this last year, this species was delisted due to recovery. Doesn't always happen like this, but this is kind of where we're working towards. We have 2 native species of tortoises in Arizona. And the top one here, this is the Mojave tortoise. It is Gopherus agassizi, and it only occurs in the very northwestern part of Arizona. And it also occurs in parts of California and Nevada. It is actually a federally listed species. However, its cousin, which is the Sonoran Desert tortoise, is not listed. And the reason being is that these 2 species were actually synonymous with one another. There were no genetic distinctions known when it was listed in 1982 until about 2011, when the Sonoran Desert tortoise was given its own specific status. So it was Gopherus moravki. So it is not listed, but it remains protected in Arizona. There have been many attempts to try to list it. Starting in about 2015, there was a complete species status assessment to look at the population dynamics and how successfully established they were in these different areas. And it was found in 2022 that it wasn't warranted as a federally protected species. So, but it is in Arizona, and we do believe that in the coming years that it will receive federally listed status again because of all of the different threats. And I'll talk to you about those. There's a myriad of natural and anthropogenic causes that threaten these tortoises. One being sickness. So a lot of our tortoises suffer, actually in North America, a lot of tortoises suffer from an upper respiratory tract disease that causes wheezing, there's some nasal discharge, very weak, and the tortoises that are most will most likely get these are the ones that are under stress. They can have the disease their entire lives, and then as they are stressed, they will start having symptoms again of this disease. So this is something that we watch out for. This is also one of the reasons why you'll see signs all over the place saying, if you have a pet desert tortoise, do not put it back in the wild, because it could have this disease and it could spread it to the wild populations, which are more prone to having symptoms of this disease. They can recover, but they'll still have the ability to have the disease again later in life. There's also some natural predation. So this is a small juvenile desert tortoise that has clearly been munched on. Most of the predators in Arizona include just our carnivores, so foxes and coyotes, and then also mountain lions. When coyotes don't have rabbits to eat, for example, so when rabbits don't have, the populations of rabbits go down, they're more likely to try to munch on desert tortoises. Some other natural predators too. Presumably we found this tortoise actually in a beehive, which may have died of that cause. It does look like a nice burrow, but you can kind of see in this particular area, there are a lot of bees in here. And we found this by accident because we heard the sound, saw the dead tortoise and thought better of it, and we had to escape very quickly. So those kind of natural causes occur too. And then of course, causes by people. So roads, things like this, roads and development can, and certain types of fences as well, can interrupt the connectivity between tortoises and their habitats. There's a statistic out there that says that there can be up to 13,000 tortoises killed on roads every year. So these that can be a big issue too. It's another very important threat is climate related, habitat alteration and destruction. So we kind of already know about this. So everyone here knows that in the Western US, we're suffering from extreme drought. And in Southern Arizona, our major climatic pattern that influences the health of ecosystems is our monsoon. And that provides a vast majority of the rainfall that occurs every year. So shifts in those monsoons over the years can greatly affect the amount and type of vegetation that grows here that can provide food for herbivores like tortoises. This figure is from the US Drought Monitoring System, and it shows drought conditions at the start of each calendar year in our study so far. So the star is our study area in Tucson, and these are our 3 survey years so far. They've all begun in moderate to exceptional drought conditions. In fact, the last year's monitoring season, 2024, has followed one of our hottest years on record. And this is what that looks like in practice. So this is part of one of our study sites during right before the 2021 monsoon. So after 2020, one of our hottest years, this is what that looks like. And then as soon as we did get one of our best monsoons, this is what that looked like. So you can try to imagine trying to find a tortoise in that. They are very hard to see, as you can see. But one of the other things that this can affect as well is it can facilitate the growth of invasive species. So if you look, of course, in this red circle, this really light colored grass, I'm sure you all know what this grass is. It's buffalo grass. It's an invasive that outcompetes native plants. It facilitates wildfires, and also it's not nutritious to herbivores. Herbivores don't want to eat it. So it really takes the place of things like really good foraging food for the tortoises. So all of these different things in combination are affecting our populations of tortoises. And this is why it's very important to study them long-term to try to figure out what we can do to best recover these populations of tortoises. So this is what our study looks like, okay? We have 20 separate plots that we survey that are distributed across Tucson Mountain Park in 3 different units. So Sweetwater Preserve, Painted Hills Trails Park, and Tucson Mountain Park. And of course, this is all a recreational park, so there's lots of trails and people throughout these areas. This is across also 22,000 acres. These plots were determined by modeling all the suitable habitat for tortoises and then generating just random study plots that had reasonable access so we could actually get there, a good distance from roads and development so that our tortoises aren't being run over every day. And then also some reasonable terrain because we have to protect ourselves as well while we're out here surveying. So what we did was each plot is visited throughout a season 3 times between July and September. So during our monsoon season, we visit each plot 3 times. And so that makes 60 visits, right? 60 visits to each of these every 3 years. It's pretty time consuming and it's is a lot of work. And so far, our 3 study years have been 2018, 2021, and 2024. Now, at each of our plots, this is kind of what our plot design looks like. This is actually one of our plots in I think it's Sweetwater. So yeah, it's in the Sweetwater area. So each of our plots are split into 17 transects that we walk, and they're 170 meters long, and they're placed 10 meters apart. And this is meant to provide general guidance for the surveyors to get as close to full coverage of that entire plot as possible. So if there is a tortoise on that plot, we should be able to find it with the methods that we're using. You'll see that there's colors, different colors of these transects. So we actually put this into field maps on our tablets, go out into the field, we see the colored lines, and we tell each other who's going to be on what line, and we walk those colored lines, and it's really easy to see them on our tablets as we walk them. They used to just be black and white, and it was impossible to figure out which line that you were on, because you could get messed up pretty quickly because you're going back and forth through pretty difficult terrain. And we're looking for tortoises. And the way that we look is not just walking in a straight line. We look under every bush. We look in every shelter that we can find. We also mark things like, we mark the shelters. If we see a rock shelter that a tortoise might be in, we'll mark it on our map so that we have that data later. If we see tortoise scat, we'll mark it because that's a sign that the tortoise was there. We also mark things like tracks, because sometimes you can actually see underneath a plant, underneath a tree or something like that, a little indention in the sand that looks like a tortoise was resting there. So those are the kinds of things that we look for and we mark down. And of course, every single individual tortoise that we find, we have a whole set of data that we collect on those tortoises too. And then of course, temperature, humidity, rainfall, cloud cover, those different types of things too. Now, all of this we can collect digitally using field maps, which is amazing. It makes things a lot easier. I can't even imagine carrying around paper data sheets anymore, and I'm glad that we do not. So the fun part is actually finding a tortoise and processing it. So we collect data on every single one of our tortoises. That includes things like body condition and demographic data. So length, width, height of the shell, the weight of the tortoise, the sex and age category, whether they're adults or juveniles. The way that we can tell the sex of the tortoise is from either the bottom of the tortoise. So the males actually have a little bit of a concave shell on the bottom because, of course, they're on top. And then also you can look at tails. So the tails of male tortoises are a little bit longer than female tortoises. And many times when the male tortoises are ready to mate, they have these glands in their on their faces. And I'll show you that in one of our pictures later. They get quite large. We also look for things like skin anomalies and scoot anomalies. You can actually see in this particular tortoise, Hershey, this scoot is different and it's actually split up and it shouldn't be. So there should be 4 scoots across their vertebrae here, and this one has an extra one. So we'll count that and we'll say that this one has a scoot anomaly. And that can actually help us determine that individual later. That's like one of the signs that shows us like who this individual is, if all of our other ways that we determine which individual is which are not there. So health, that's a really, really important. We want to know if they have parasites, wounds, or scars. You can see this little one, Domino, definitely got a little bit of its shell bitten, probably by a lion or a coyote, kind of earlier on. Sometimes nasal discharge, breathing, these are all the signs of our upper respiratory infection. Swollen eyes, or in this individual, this is Pirate, he only has one eye. Not sure how that happened, but that's why his name is Pirate. We mark all of our tortoises so that we can, if we ever recapture, we know who the individual is. So every individual is fitted with a unique ID number that we talk to Arizona Game and Fish and U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the National Park Service, which all do similar studies as we do to tortoises in areas that are close by. So we make sure that our numbering system does not mess with their numbering system. So we've got our own numbering system. And first, we put that number on a license plate on the back of the shell. And that license plate is white out with a Sharpie number, and then we cover it in epoxy so that hopefully it will stay on there long term, even when they get in their burrow and, you know, rub their butts against rocks. So all those kinds of things. Sometimes they do come off, and so we also notch them. So in this one, you can kind of see down here on this scoot, you can see a little notch. There's a notching system on the those marginal scutes that corresponds with that number 262. In fact, this is 200. That represents 200. And so the other scutes, there'll be a notch here for 6, and I think a notch here for a 2. So each one has an individual. We also name our tortoises. Other groups do not do this, probably just, well, I'm not sure why you wouldn't, but we do it just because it's a good community input, and it helps us with our public education campaigns. So we name them, and we actually have a system where the public can also name some of the tortoises. We collect all of that and use it in our education campaigns for the benefit of our taxpayers, and then also just as a community engagement component of our Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan. It also just gives us, it helps us in the field as much too, because we start to get to know some of these individuals. Now, overall, when you do long-term studies, one of the main goals is just to determine of the area that you are surveying and how much of that area is occupied. And that can kind of help you determine population numbers long-term. So we're not quite at the point, statistically anyway, after only 3 surveys, to get really great occupancy numbers. But as we collect more data over the years, we get better and better and better statistical power for that. And so we look for things like the 4 parameters that we measure with our statistics and our occupancy. So if there are tortoises present or not. Detection, so if we can detect tortoises really well or not. And then we can also look at colonization rates and extinction rates. And of course, those rates will get better with time, or it'll be more predictable with time. And all of these things can be affected by what's on the ground, those other things that we're measuring. For example, elevation, how far up we are on a mountain. So this is one of our plots. You can actually see me in the picture in yellow. I am up on that mountain, and yes, there are tortoises all the way up there. So precipitation can affect whether or not tortoises are on a plot. The slope. I mean, maybe if it's up and down, if it's just a vertical slope, you're probably not going to have tortoises there, okay? They'll probably be at the bottom because they can't actually climb up vertically, just like people can't as well without help. Soil type, presence of a wash, numbers of shelters, how many shelters are on the plot that the tortoises can go to when it gets too hot or too cold, or when there are predators available, right? And then also distance to development. So if you're really, really close to where people are and where people are building houses, those tortoises probably can't live in those areas. Amount of buffalo grass, that's a big one, because buffalo grass, as we talked about earlier, will outcompete the native vegetation that they like to eat. Also, how to detect tortoises. Many of you may have seen a tortoise before, and I'm not sure if you've ever tried to go out looking for them, but often you'll find them either on a trail or something like that. But if you're actually going out and trying to look for them, they could be hiding under a tree, they could be hiding under a bush, they could be hiding in a hole, they could be sitting right next to a rock, and you can't tell the difference between a rock and a tortoise unless you have had many years of experience doing so. The weather can affect whether or not you can detect a tortoise. If it's really rainy and you don't see very well, if there's cloud cover and the sun doesn't shine off of their shells as well as in other times. So there's a lot of different things. And also herbaceous cover, too much grass. They could be hiding under grass. So there's all these different things that we can model that helps us predict when we're going to find a tortoise. And that's really important when we're doing occupancy studies and long-term monitoring of populations, because our goal is to find out how many individuals are there. Okay, all the good stuff. So in 2024, so our last survey, we found 44 individual tortoises. They were captured and marked, and we found them on 15 out of our 20 plots. And that, here are our numbers from 2018. So in 2018, we found 42 tortoises on only 12 of the plots, and 2021, 39 on those 12 plots. So this year was a great year because we added 3 more plots that were occupied that weren't occupied before, or that we weren't able to detect them on before. So 75% of our study area is occupied by tortoises, which is really great. Excuse me. One of the things that we did not do, we did not mark our hatchling tortoises. So any of the tortoises that were born in 2023 that we saw in 2024, they're very, very small. We don't mark them because they are too small, and we don't want to stress them out. So we'll just mark them with a Sharpie dot. We'll take some of the data that we can, and we just let those go. And hopefully they'll be big enough the next year or the next season that we can mark them again. Our numbers also don't include our incidental observations. So that means tortoises that we found that were just off the plots, but they weren't within that big square. Those we still mark and we capture for health indicators and things like that, because they might live on the plot, they just weren't there that day. So our real number this year was 61 sightings of 53 individual tortoises. Now this is where we found the tortoises, and we like to use this figure to help us determine if we're actually going out during the time when they're active. So we usually go out about 6 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock, and we're out before 11, because during the monsoon season, even though it's raining sometimes, it can get hot. Too hot for tortoises to be handled and too hot for the people to be handling them. So we try to get out early. You can see here that almost 65% or over 65% of the time we found tortoises in the open, so walking about, doing their thing, or just hiding under some vegetation. And that means that they were active at the time. So those that are in rock shelters, caves, burrows, usually are just trying to get out of the heat, or it's a little too early and a little too cold and they're not ready to come out yet. So most of the tortoises we find are active and are roaming about. And for our statistics across all years of our study, 62% of our area is occupied. So when we look at all the numbers of our tortoises, where they were found, we can say that 62% of our area we know is so far occupied. That means that that's the particular area. And we can detect, our detection rate is 61%. That means we detect about 61% of our tortoises. So that is our estimate so far. Again, these statistics will get much better over the long-term study, because of course we're only 3 years in. We need to get at least 5 to 6 studies to get really powerful statistics. What we're looking for here is our colonization rate is bigger than our extinction rate, because we do not want our extinction rate to be bigger, because then we know our population is really declining. So far our colonization rate is larger than our extinction rate, and we want that to increase over the years as we do more studies. Now, when we look at the things that actually affect whether a tortoise is there or not, the only piece of data that we collected that did affect whether or not a tortoise was in a place was the percent of the plot facing east. And what that means is that that's where you're going to get your first sunlight. That's the first sunlight of the morning. And so that means that if there's a lot of the plot facing east, that's where the tortoises are going to be. They want to come out of their burrows and they want to heat up as fast as they can so they can start eating. And so those are the places where you're going to find them. You'll find them on those east facing slopes in the mornings. Also, the number of shelter sites. So if there's a lot of shelter sites, like lots of little burrows and rock caves and caliche caves, if there's many of those on a site, you're more likely to find a tortoise on that site. And that makes sense, because that's where those tortoises live. That's where they spend their evenings. That's where they also go to hide during the day so that they can get out of the sun. So if there are more shelters, more tortoises. That completely makes sense. However, our detection rate was not affected by any of the measures that we took, which was really interesting, because we'll have to say, like in 2021, we found that one of our surveyors was much better at detecting tortoises than others. And if anyone knows anything about our team, I can make you guess who that is. We actually gave him his own statistic called the I factor, but that particular surveyor had done tortoise surveys before and had many, many, many years of tortoise surveying, so was able to detect more tortoises. That didn't happen this year, which was really interesting. So this year, that wasn't actually a factor. So it could just mean that we had more surveyors that had more experience, and we all started kind of equaling out in our abilities to detect a tortoise, which is really cool. We had 34 recaptured tortoises out of the total 105 that we've been marked in this study so far. So that means 34 of our tortoises were recaptured from some previous year, which is cool. So for example, this year in 2024, we recaptured 5 tortoises that were first captured in 2018, 13 that were captured in 2021. And then this year alone, we recaptured 5 of our own tortoises on other times that we were visiting plots. Because remember, we visit our plots 3 times each. We caught 5 tortoises again. One individual was caught all 3 years of that study. So all 3 study years. First in 2018, and then again in 2021, and then twice in 2024. And I named her Lady of the Lake. So she's actually on a plot that we named Camelot because of how rough the terrain is. It's like walking on the turrets of a castle. So all of the tortoises in that plot are named after King Arthur's court. So we do have an Arthur, and we have a Lancelot, and we have a Lady Guinevere. So this kind of allows us to look at things like body condition. So how heavy are the tortoises versus how long they are? There have been no differences in body condition among the years in this survey, which is really great because we have seen a lot of climatic shifts. We've seen a lot of shifts in amount of vegetation that was available. We've seen a lot of shifts in the amount of precipitation per monsoon season, but it seems like our tortoises still are continuing to have similar body conditions to other years. So we shouldn't, we're not seeing those shifts, and that's really great. That means that even though there's all these climatic shifts, it's not affecting the tortoises that much, which is great. We only had a few individuals with signs of illness. So our signs of illness include all of those symptoms of upper respiratory tract disease. So occluded nares, or like kind of closed up nostrils, wheezing, nasal discharge, like just a runny nose, and just having a damp nose too. This is a good example. In 2021, this is Pancake, and you can see on her nose is very wet. And she also looks a bit thin, and she looks like she's a bit desiccated, right? So she's missing a little bit of water, and that could be the stress that was causing her to show signs of an upper respiratory infection. So in 2018, we had 2 out of the 41 who had symptoms. In 2021, it increased to 6. But remember, 2021 was that great monsoon season, but it followed the 2020 monsoon. So we did have some environmental stressors that may have increased that number. But this year, we only had 2. We had 2 individuals, and these were the 2 individuals, Honeydew and Edith. And they did have a little bit of nasal discharge and damp beaks, but other than that, they were strong, and they were alert, and they were walking around. And the other great thing is that we captured Pancake again this year. So Pancake was recaptured in 2024, and she did not show those signs of illness. So she was able to fully recover, or at least partly recover. She might, if there are more stressors in the future, she could have those again. But these are the kinds of things that we look at for our individual tortoises. We can also look at injuries. So this first picture is 2021. And you can see there's a pretty big part of that scoot that was taken out. It could have been a chip. It could have been a puncture wound that from an animal. But in 2024, you can see how well it healed. Same thing down here. There's a small nick in the shell here that was probably caused by some kind of predation attempt. And you can see it healed here. It was pretty great. Some of the other really interesting things that you can do too is some of our individuals that are too small to mark, we can take really great pictures of those individuals, look at some of those anomalies, like I was talking about different kinds of shell anomalies and things like that. And you can look at the tortoises that you catch 3 years later, the juveniles, and try to match those up with tortoises that you may have caught 3 years ago. And so that's one of the things that we're starting to do is take very, very detailed photos of each one of the tortoises so that we can match up individuals, especially if they weren't marked and now that they're being marked for the first time. We did have this last year just 2 small hatchling individuals. They're quite small and they are quite adorable. We measure buffalo grass. So buffalo grass did increase about tenfold between 2018 and 21, and it slowed by 2024, but it's still a big increase. So it increased over 1,000 square meters, but in different areas. So there is a lot of really great efforts with our restoration team and the Tucson Bird Alliance, used to be Audubon Society, Tucson Bird Alliance, that's doing a lot of great restoration work getting buffalo grass out of Tucson Mountain Park. And it's been fantastic. And you can actually see the differences when you're up in those mountains. However, if certain areas start increasing with buffalo grass, it can start to affect the body condition when it reaches at least maybe 15%. So we're hoping that we can slow that down. Okay, so in conclusion, we have 62% of our study area that's occupied, which is fantastic number. So far, it's been only influenced by the number of shelters and the percent of plot that's facing east, so where they can have those nice warm spots to warm up. Our detection's not influenced by anything so far. We've been able to detect tortoises really well and not have those other covariates affect our tortoises at all or affect our detection. Colonization is still bigger than extinction, which is what we want to see, and we want to see that gap get bigger and bigger. Our health conditions vary season to season, and we can see that it is kind of influenced a little bit by those climatic swings. We see that higher number of upper respiratory disease in 2021 after that really rough season. But we don't see any change in body condition in most of the individuals on average, which is great. Again, this is a long-term study. So that means we still have many seasons to go. Our next monitoring year is 2027. And as we keep adding this data, we're going to be able to get closer and closer to our population numbers, trying to determine how they're doing and how well they're colonizing new areas and whether there are any extinction events at all. Because this is also a long-lived tortoise, or it's a long-lived animal as well. And we can continue to see and track the health of some of our individuals. And now that we have 105 tortoises, the other big part of this is community engagement and partnerships. So we do long-term studies on tortoises, but so does National Park Service, and so does Arizona Game and Fish. And so one of the cool things that we have been able to do is we have been able to partner with these different agencies and the TO Nation to come up with better ways to monitor tortoises, and also how to collect the same data, share the same data, and also share work. We have the National Park Service staff come and volunteer with us, and we will volunteer with them on different seasons as well. So we can interact and share all of our knowledge, because we're all out in different parts of the county doing these studies, and we all have different experiences, and it's really great to share. Community engagement. So we have 105 marked tortoises now in the Tucson area, okay? And that means that more and more people are going to start running into them. So for example, Lady of the Lake, this tortoise has been captured in the same area, almost the same exact spot, almost the same exact burrow every single year. We know where she lives now, which is great. So we can go back and we can look for this particular individual and we can see how she's doing, right? This one is a great story. So this tortoise was captured in 2024 off of the main plot that we were on, but we marked him and captured him anyway. His name is Tuna because he was eating a prickly pear fruit when we found him. Just weeks later, maybe about a month later, we were contacted because a hiker found Tuna and was wondering about why it was numbered, who was studying it, what the study was, and we got to interact with this member of the public. And he had such a great experience that he decided to get a tattoo of Tuna on his arm. So that was a pretty great experience, and that was wonderful. This individual, this is an individual that, as you can see, I don't know if you recognize where you would see this picture. This is on iNaturalist. Just in May, we had a little tiny bit of rain, and I was looking on iNaturalist for tortoises just to look to see if anyone saw any observations. And yes, someone posted a picture of this one. And this is number 348, which is not actually 348. There was a whole story behind her. She was captured in 2021, was showing some severe signs of stress due to heat and also some upper respiratory infection. And so the staff decided just to mark her and let her go, not notch her, and just kind of move on and let her go. And they didn't want to stress her out anymore. So they accidentally mislabeled her. She wasn't supposed to be 348, but 349, which we corrected later. But the individual who did find this tortoise found her very close to where she was marked, found her on a golf course at Star Pass, and wanted to know more information. We named this one Callie, and so he's very the person who found her is very interested in her story and is now looking for more, making sure to let us know when there are more tortoises on the golf course, and now sends us direct pictures because he's a landscaper there. So we've made all these different connections. We also had another story. It occurred a while ago, but on the same golf course in Star Pass, an individual found a tortoise and decided to take it home. Then found the number on the tortoise, called Arizona Game and Fish to determine if they knew anything about the tortoise, who then made them contact us again, and then the tortoise was put back where it's supposed to go. His name was Arthur. So we have a lot of these really interesting opportunities to engage the community with stuff like this. So with that, I just have to thank all of the people who have been helping us with our tortoise monitoring. We have contributions by local and community volunteers that come out with us to do tortoise monitoring. 21 person days were contributed by our partners, including National Park Service, our Earth Grant Program interns, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the TO Nation, also Arizona Game and Fish Department. So we have a lot of great partners that help us out, and we thank them very much. It takes a lot to get all of this work done. So, and with that, I will take questions.
Thank you, Melissa. Oh, so cool. This is really a really cool project. Thank you. Okay, who has questions? Kimberly, go ahead.
Thank you for sharing, Melissa. This is excellent. Yeah, I have several questions, and so I'm gonna put them all out there. And so the first one is, where do they lay eggs? Is it in the burrows? Can you find eggs? Are they covered? And second, related to eggs, do the hatchlings, the sex of the hatchlings determined by temperature, as I understand is the case for like sea turtles and so forth? And the other question is, do you treat the illnesses? Can you treat the illnesses, or what is the policy when you find an injured or sick tortoise?
Okay, first questions first. Eggs. They dig burrows to lay eggs, so they will go down into some burrows. They won't stay in those burrows. Those are just burrows to lay eggs in. So they'll go down and they will dig, lay eggs, and they'll try to cover up a little bit. We have found lots of burrows, like dug up eggs. Gila monsters love eating the eggs. And so we'll find some of those sometimes. Hatchlings are, yes, they're temperature dependent sex determination. So one of the things that is being studied at the moment in the San Francisco Zoo is whether or not our hotter days and our hotter climate in general is going to start affecting those sex ratios of tortoises. And they're finding that, yes, it does, but it all depends on when those hottest days are. So one of the things that they're looking for is if there's a lot of variation in temperature, lots of hot, lots of cold, then they're usually female. But if it's like very specific in a particular temperature, then it's a male. So I hope that I don't get that backwards. But yes, they do have the temperature dependent sex determination. It will affect things in general. The females aren't, not yet anyway, digging deeper holes to keep the temperature more consistent yet. But that's only with a small study of some individuals that they caught in the wild. So hopefully there's going to be more research in the future about that particular problem, because that can be, that's going to be something that we can actually see and measure in the next 5 years or so. And then also, yes, and Sammy says that she thinks, hotter is female. The other question of sickness, we do not treat them in any way. When we find the upper respiratory infections and things like that, we just note it. And one of the things that we do to try to help not spread it is every individual, we wear gloves when we handle them. We take and we wash all of our equipment before we go to the next tortoise, so that we try to prevent that spread. But we know where the sick tortoises are. So if we start seeing a pattern on a plot that all the tortoises are sick, then that's something that we can report to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and they might have a particular protocol for that. I think that answers your questions.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and related to eggs, how many babies do they have?
Oh, goodness. Sammy, could you help me out here? How many eggs would they have in a particular clutch?
I don't know. I'm
like
guessing
8 to 12.
Yeah, something like that. So
yeah.
Ian's a
It kind of really depends on the size of the tortoise too. So some of the larger females can carry more eggs. So.
Okay, cool. Julia, go ahead.
Hello. So Dale and I have been watching. Thank you for the presentation, Melissa.
And thank you, Dale, for helping out so much.
Yeah. So the question that I have is about if you observe dead tortoises, how do you take that into account? If it were how would it affect your information base, with regard to the extinction rates? How would you process it, one that you knew you'd seen before, for instance, and maybe you haven't had that happen yet, but
it just happened this year for the first time.
Okay.
So for the first time, we found a carcass of one of our individuals. We did not know immediately because most of the scoots had been removed, but there were notches, and so we could actually see that particular individual. I don't think so. For our statistical analysis, I don't believe that this particular modeling that we do takes into account specific individuals that we see that have died. This is something that we'll report, and we report carcasses. We report the number of carcasses and the number of dead ones that we do see. But I don't think it's essential in this particular statistical model that we're using.
Okay.
So
thank you.
A question from me. I'm interested by the aspect, how you said east-facing slopes where they're most commonly found. Is that for the plot as a whole or for the individual observation site? And is it an absolute, or is it just like more east than other aspects?
So most of our plots, it's a site thing. So it's just the plot itself. Each plot has a particular aspect. And it was measured using GIS. So that these were all measurements that were taken kind of way at the beginning of the study. Each plot is kind of known to be either west facing or north facing or east facing.
Okay,
So.
And is that an absolute thing? I mean, is there like a gradation of, mostly on the east and a little less on the south, or?
Yes. So every single plot has how much is east, how much is west, how much is north, how much is south. So that's like the out of the 100%.
But I mean,
all of that can be measured using
in terms
GIS.
of the tortoises. Is there a gradation?
Individual tortoises of the particular site? No, we don't have that yet. I'm sure we can. Sammy, I think we can probably measure that very specific point.
Yeah,
it might be a bit difficult, but
but yeah, especially with the LiDAR that I'm sure we have now, we could probably extract that for the location that we find these tortoises, and then we could compare it. Since they're random, we could compare it to what the values are across the whole plots. Yeah, probably do something.
It could be interesting in terms of predicting tortoise distribution, or at least tortoise density across, the Tucson Mountains, across the tortoise range, if you can get a little more specific on that.
I think you'd also have to figure out what time of day and some of those other things too. Because of course a tortoise isn't just going to stay there like a pineapple cactus would or something, right? They will definitely wander and spend different times of their day on different parts of the aspect. So it would be interesting. It would be very interesting. And I think that in the future, when we do have the opportunity to look at some of those deeper data points, I think we can do that.
Thank you, Julia. I see Kimberly's hand up again. Kimberly?
Yes. It's wonderful to see the collaborations with other local agency partners. And I'm wondering, have you compared notes with them to see if the same trend or what the larger regional trend is for tortoise populations? You talked about how the colonization is more favorable. Is that true across the range of the tortoise?
Well, just this year, we provided all of our statistical analysis, like all of our R code for our statistical analysis to our partners, so they can start looking at the same things that we do. But I think we are at least the first in this area to do studies like this. So hopefully they will start trying to do the same thing, and we can start comparing notes.
Thank you, Kimberly. I have a question. Why you don't use GPS trackers? Can you do that?
You can. I mean, they're really expensive, and it kind of takes a lot more effort to. There's some studies at U of A that and part of the I think the National Park Service or one of the services were looking at where tortoises spend their time. But for a long-term study like this, your tracker is not going to keep its battery. It's going to fall off. It's going to be really hard to keep on. Sometimes you can see the trackers on if you just look up on Google a tortoise with a big tracker backpack on. It's kind of heavy, and it doesn't really work well for burrows and stuff like that. So those are the kinds of things you look for. I want to know how tortoises move throughout a season, not how long or what they're going to look like over 30 years time. That's kind of not the best way to do that. And we're trying to, save money and time and effort. And there are only three of us, and 250,000 acres.
Okay.
And 44 species.
Oh boy. Francisco, go ahead.
Hi, Melissa. Great presentation, by the way. Thank you. I wanted to ask, and maybe I missed it. the surveyors, do they work in teams of two or solo? And how long does the interaction with the tortoise take, like the data collection, so that they minimize the stress levels on them?
So we work in teams. It can be anywhere from sometimes one, sometimes we only have one person on a survey, but usually those are the ones that we don't really have that many tortoises, or like some of the really easy ones to get to. We usually do from 2 to, at the most we do 5. And usually we only have 5 when we have some of our partners there. The tortoise specifically, we try to minimize the amount of time. I think we got the processing time down to about 15 minutes this year. So that's what we try to do. Because I mean, it is a lot of stuff and it's a long time, but we also, we try to provide them, if they do accidentally void themselves because they're stressed out, we try to provide them water so they can get water back in them. The best way to do that is grabbing a prickly pear fruit and putting it in front of them, and they'll just go to town. So they don't seem to be afraid of people at all. And that was something that we were a little worried about at first. But we had one instance where we were processing 2 tortoises at the same time, because there was this whole just condo of tortoises and black-tailed rattlesnakes, just a condo of tortoises. And then one just slides down the wash and just sits there in front of us. And then when we let them go, they just go and follow us sometimes. So we were kind of surprised by that. We were surprised by their ease around people.
Yeah.
So kind of helps us a little bit.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yes, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yes.
Jen. I think you're still muted, Jen.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry if I missed it, but can you explain what you want us to do if we should, for example, find any tortoise in a place of distress, like in the middle of a road, or also what to do if we find a marked tortoise?
So if you ever find a marked tortoise, you can just email us directly. It's really great to hear the stories and find where those locations are. We really want to know if they are traveling far off of their plots. Finding them in the middle of the road, I think that the Arizona Game and Fish rules say that you can pick it up and move it, but in the direction that it was walking. So just make sure that it gets off of the road. And other signs of distress, usually just leave them alone, unless they are like on a road and are going to get hurt. So.
And I've heard, but I don't know if it's true, that when you pick them up on the road, you want to keep them kind of close to the road and keep them level so they don't stress out. Does that matter?
Yes.
Yeah, keeping them lower to the ground. This is just Sammy, sorry. Keeping them lower to the ground and keeping their kind of head facing away from you and in the direction they were going is good, kind of. And don't move like too fast or anything. You don't have to go crazy slow. Just pretend you're hovering them over.
I've heard if they get stressed out, they can pee, which is, detrimental in the desert for them to lose that liquid.
But with all the ones we did this summer, like I think, Melissa, we only had like 1 or 2 void, right? And we were doing a lot of stuff to them. So it could still happen, but if you're just kind of picking them up, moving them a short distance, kind of keeping them level and not messing with them, I don't think the risk is super high compared to like the risk of getting crushed by a car, especially.
Right.
So.
All right. If anyone else has more questions, Sammy, could you answer them? I'm going to get kicked out of my hotel room in a few minutes. So.
Okay. Oh yeah, no, I think
I got to check out.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
And